welcoming Micky Dolenz.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much for that lovely reception.
Yeah, how about that? I've never heard a crowd quite so noisy here before.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It costs me a lot of money to have all these people out here.
Have you been to Liverpool before?
On tour, yeah, a couple times, but just, one day, one night, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got about 45 minutes and there's so much ground to cover. We're going to show some pictures as well, which the people out there can see, and we can see them on the monitor. And I want to draw together the Beatles and the Monkees in this conversation, to look at the places where you cross paths and see how close the two groups were for a period of time. Okay? The common conclusion, which I know is wrong, is that the Monkees ripped off the Beatles and the Beatles hated you as a result, but that's really wide of the mark, isn't it?
Yeah, quite, yeah. The Monkees simply was a television show about a group, an imaginary group that lived in this Malibu beach house, which was a set.
Oh no.
Which does beg the question of how we could afford a Malibu beach house when we never worked.
Yeah, so you see the prices of Malibu beach.
But it was about a group that wanted to be the Beatles. And in that sense, resonated with all the kids around the States and the world, who were in their basements, in their garages, in their living rooms, practicing and playing and wanting to become famous and become the Beatles. It's a really important note that on the Monkey Show, we never were famous. It was the struggle for success. As opposed to, say, the Beatle movies like Hard Day's Night and Help. They were the Beatles and they were very successful and had fans and screaming. On the Monkey Show, that never happened.
Yes.
It was that struggle for success that I think was one of the things that endeared it to everybody. But no, the Monkees was not the American answer to the Beatles. It was this TV show about this group. In a similar way, funny way, like Glee.
Yes.
Is a show about an imaginary glee club.
Right.
But they can actually all do it.
Yes.
They can sing and act. And the producers of the Monkees obviously had in mind that we were going to eventually go on the road and play and record, because the audition process was extensive and it had a lot to do with music and singing and playing. My audition piece on guitar, I was a guitar player actually.
You were cast as the drummer, but you were a guitar player in actuality.
Well, in actuality, yeah, as a child, I played originally Spanish guitar, Segovia, and, as a child, 10, 12, 14 years old. And in the early 60s, before the Beatles, of course, and that pop music, I would take my guitar to parties and, my high school parties, 14 years old, 15, 16. And I would play Villa Lobos or Segovia. And the girls would say, "Do you know any Kingston Trio?" And I'm like, "I'll be right back." Hang down your head, down, dooley. And that morphed into folk music, the Wee Five and Hoyt Axton and, Bob Dylan, playing guitar, acoustic guitar. And then that morphed into rock and roll. Again, pre-British invasion, doing cover tunes, like Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry, for instance. And that was my audition piece.
For the Monkees. Yes, to prove you could do it.
So you had to be able to play and sing.
They thought you were such a good guitarist, they made you a drummer.
Well, they said actually when they said, and you're going to be the drummer, I'm like, I play guitar, and they said, yeah, but we have enough guitar players, so you're going to be the drummer, and I'm like, okay, fine.
So you had a crash course in drumming, did you?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd already been in the business for 10, 12 years at that time. I'd had a series when I was a kid called Circus Boy.
Yes.
And how would anybody know that? You were not born, your parents weren't even born. I had a series called Circus Boy on NBC, and they said when I was cast in the series, and you're going to learn to ride an elephant. And I was like, okay, where do I start? So when they cast me in the Monkees, they said, you're going to be the drummer. I said, great, where do I start? And I wasn't starting from scratch. I'd been in rock and roll cover bands and playing stuff and playing guitar, or mainly lead singing. But, I sat down behind a kit every once in a while and would play. But I could read music. So I wasn't starting totally from scratch. But yeah, it was a crash course, absolutely. But it was months of practice and lessons, to play. But, if you get your head around that genesis, that DNA of where the Monkees, started. I still to this day will have journalists who supposedly have done their homework, and they'll say, well, what was it like when the group got the television show? What?
Well, you premiered on American television in September '66.
Mm-hmm.
You were a huge hit immediately. The show arrived in Britain, I don't know if you know this, December 31. It was New Year's Eve '66.
Wow.
So the very dawn of 1967, the Monkees arrived in the UK.
Yeah.
I remember being at school and suddenly everyone in my class went from being a Beatles fan to a Monkees fan, except me. And I'm going, no, it's the Beatles really, but everyone was falling for the Monkees.
It was, the Monkees actually was, a number of years after the original Beatle invasion. And our demographic was actually the younger sisters and brothers
Yes.
of Beatle fans.
Yes.
That 2 or 3 years at that age is a lot. Our demographic for the Monkees television show was 10 to 12 years old.
Yeah. The Beatles fans of
By then, we're 14, 18, 20 and older.
I was going to say, in America particularly, the Beatles fans in about 64 were 15, 16 years old.
Yeah, so by the Monkees...
So by then they're 19, 20.
18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And that was my age.
Right.
I was a Beatle fan.
Right.
I probably, and I've been asked this before, and I don't mind saying it, I probably would not have been a fan of the Monkees.
Yes.
That was not my kind of music at the time. I was into Sgt. Pepper and Stones and Mose Allison and Ella Fitzgerald and still am. I probably would have been a fan of the show because of the humor, because it was that kind of Marx Brothers, and it was John Lennon who first made that comment. They're like the Marx Brothers, and that's a much more accurate definition. The Monkees were much more like the Marx Brothers and the Beatles, essentially.
Yeah. Now, as I said, the Monkees debuted here on the 31st of December. By February, you came to London. I'm going to bring up some pictures here. Because here is a full page from the Daily Mirror of February the something or other, 8th, I think, 1967. A monkey and his God. How about that?
Well, it ain't far from the truth. I was extremely starstruck. I was trying desperately to be cool and not. I had an autograph book, I think, in my back pocket, because like I say, I was a huge fan. And graciously, Paul invited. It was a press op. It was like Monkey meets Beatle thing. It was a press op, and
though it was a press op, they went along with it. Paul McCartney is there, very happily accommodating you in his house.
Absolutely.
During the making of such.
They got it.
Yeah.
Paul, and to this day, I saw him last time was like not even a year or two ago, rehearsing for Coachella in California. He invited me to I see him, and he's always so gracious. And of course, Ringo and John, I probably knew the best, probably Ringo the best, but they got it.
Yeah.
They got the fact that it was a TV show about this imaginary band, and was like the Marx Brothers.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's when he invited me down to Abbey Road Studios.
Right.
For the recording of that album, Sergeant Bill.
Sergeant Bill goes to Heavenly Hearts.
I don't know whatever happened to that album. It was so good. You never know, right? Yep, there he is with that cigarette in his hand.
Yeah. Did you have one of those with him?
Oh, yeah. Love tobacco.
Yeah.
Well, you can look at my face. I mean, I was like 6 sheets to the wind. It was wonderful. We had dinner, just the two of us and some friends, and I think one of his minders and my minders, and we just sat and watched TV and hung out. And then he invited me down to.
Did he play you any tracks? Any acid?
Not that night, no. But the next day or a couple of days later.
Yeah.
Is my first of a few. Oh my God! Look at me.
Yes, you've had another one.
I'm like, oh, dog. Yeah, doggy. No, that's when he invited me down to the studio.
We'll get there in a minute.
Yeah.
At the same time, separately, Mike Nesmith and his wife Phyllis were over there, and I think they were staying with John out of the house in Weybridge. Yeah, which is, again, quite fantastic that John would say, come and stay.
Yeah, like I said, they got it.
Yeah.
And other people, Frank Zappa was a big fan.
Right.
He got it.
Yeah.
What's the guy? Politics of Ecstasy. What?
Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary. Whatever you think of him and the whole acid thing, he got it. A wonderful chapter in one of his books, Politics of Ecstasy, about the monkeys.
Right.
And there was others. I mean, a lot of people got it, but then a lot of people didn't get it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and to this day, there's a lot of people that don't get it.
I always thought that you did the Beatles a favour in that they were leaving the kind of the teeny bopper world behind them, if you like. They hadn't really wanted it in the first place, but they got it. And they were evidently starting a new chapter here in that they looked different and they weren't going to be going on the road anymore. And they weren't that bothered whether their fans stayed with them. I mean, they obviously hoped that they would, but if they didn't, okay, they won't. And you came along and filled that void for them.
It did. It
filled the void they left behind.
Yep. It filled a little vacuum again for the younger sisters and brothers who wanted their own Beatles. They wanted someone they could relate to and had teeny bopper progressive bubblegum.
Yes.
What I've called it. We did. We absolutely filled that void.
Yeah. Now there's Mike Dolenz Mike Nesmith went to the Day in the Life session. There he is with George. We've seen him with John, and there he is with George. And you went to Good Morning, Good Morning.
Well, I was at this also.
Oh, you were there
This is the big final chord section, right?
Right.
No, I was there. But the first session I went to was, it was, it turned out to be Good Morning, Good Morning. Of course, I didn't know what it was at the time. And I tell this story a lot. You've probably heard me tell this story a million times. Princess Daimler limo picks me up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to bring me to this, recording session at Abbey Road Studios. And I'm like, again, I'm such a huge fan, and I'm like, and I thought it was going to be some kind of crazy Beatlemania, fun fest, freak out, love in, be in, psycho jello thing. And I got totally dressed up for it. I mean, I had tie-dyed underwear and paisley bell-bottoms, and my hair was up in curlers, and I think I had the linen glasses, and I'm 6 sheets to the wind again, of course. and the limo drops me off in the afternoon. And I walk in, and it looks like my high school gymnasium. There's fluorescent lighting, nobody there but the four guys, sitting in little folding chairs and Ringo behind the kit, and just in jeans and t-shirts, and just playing.
Yes.
Just jump, 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 jump. And I'm like, where are the girls? I must have looked like such an idiot. I looked like a cross between Ronald McDonald and Charlie Manson. And I'll never forget it. John Lennon looks up at me and he says, "Hey, monkey man." That's what he called me, monkey.
That put you in your place.
Yeah. He says, "You want to hear what we're working on?" That's a terrible accent, I know, but. And I'm trying to be so cool in my best hipwise, you know, I'm like, "Oh yeah, far out." Good job. And he points up to George Martin, and I remember this so clearly, in that studio at Abbey Road, the production, you know, the machines are up above, a floor above. And he's wearing a three-piece suit in the middle. I don't know why I remember that so clearly. I think they had to. They had to wear their suits all day long. I don't know.
Yeah, they were allowed to wear go tireless on the weekends.
Really?
But they had to wear a tie on.
Well, I think he still had his time. And he's George Martin's up in the booth, and he pushes the button on a 4-track tape recorder. And I hear the tracks to Good Morning, Good Morning. At the time, of course, I didn't know. And we sit around, and then and I remember some guy in a white coat and a tie came in with tea. Yes. Like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. "Oh, tea time!" Sat around at a little table and had really god-awful tea. And then everybody sat around, and they, you know, we were chatting, and what's it like? And monkeys, blah, 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 blah. Me again trying to be so cool. And then I think it was John that went, "Right, lads, down the mines." And they went back to work.
Yeah, they had a fantastic work ethic, and they certainly were. They always tried to get something down in a session.
Yeah.
And if the red light went on, if you hear the tapes, you always hear John saying, "Come on, the light's on, let's do it." Let's do it.
Yeah, and I remember years later actually looking back and becoming cognizant or aware that's how they got all that done in such a short period of time, relatively speaking.
Oh, yeah.
Is at that incredible down the mines. Let's go to work and get, you know, it's amazing. It was great. So months later, I'm directing and wrote and directed an episode of the Monkees called The Frodo's Caper.
Yes.
And there was a scene at the beginning I wrote where we're in bed, waking up in the beach house. And I said, wow, it'd be so cool to have this Rube Goldberg thing that drops a needle onto a record. This is after Sgt. Pepper had been released, obviously. And wouldn't it be cool to have that song, Good Morning, that I was at the session? And I just said to the producers, go get that song. And not knowing, of course, that they never gave away, for any amount of money, any of their material at that time. But sure enough, somebody must have called somebody, and Apple or, you know, Derek Taylor or somebody, Paul or whoever, said, yeah, fine. And I don't think they even charged us any money.
Wow.
They just gave us the track for that episode. And at the beginning of that episode, if you watch it, it's Good Morning on the turntable.
That's the only episode of the Monkees with Beatles music in it, is it?
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's the only episode of anything for decades that had Beatles music in it.
Yeah.
Not until I think Michael Jackson bought the catalog, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can buy Beatles music now, but it is
Oh, now.
phenomenally expensive.
Now you can, yeah.
Yeah.
50 years ago,
Yeah.
no way.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Circus Boy earlier. I was going to talk about it anyway. There you are.
No, I'm so young!
obviously it's not possible to know how the conversation will flow. I was going to bring it up at this point, which is why the picture is here. But there you are, isn't that fantastic? That was on British TV from 57.
Yeah.
So you were known here well before the Monkees.
Yeah. I had, that was my first series. I'd done, actually, before that, I'd done some screen tests for some movies that had actually didn't get made. I think I might have done maybe like even a commercial or something. My parents were both in the business, so my father's agent would have been the one that... I have some, actually I did something before this. I have some prenatal work coming out on ultrasound. In the fetal position, you know.
You're taking that one lying down. Now, I was on my way to this picture because I like this picture as well. The same trick, I don't know whether you've 3 sheets to the wind or 4 or 5 here, but you're with Brian Epstein.
Yeah.
Same trip to London at the Disc Pop Awards at the Hilton Hotel. What did you make of Brian Epstein in this meeting, if you remember anything about it at all?
Well, of course I knew who he was, and, excuse me, I don't remember, frankly, that particular moment in time, but I do remember meeting him. We probably chatted about the business or about everything that was going on at the time. It was pretty heady days, as you can imagine. And I got glimpses, you know, in memory will come back occasionally. Somebody will, like for instance, I just bumped into Klaus Vormann, who I'd known back then, and he reminded me that we used to do tennis tournaments together, celebrity tennis tournaments. And I had totally forgotten, and I had invented all these wacky tennis rackets that the head flipped off and to do a bit of comedy and around. And he reminded me, I had totally forgot about that. And so some people will come up and remind me, but it was heady times. And the way I kind of think about it is that, and it's the old joke, if you were there, if you remember the 60s, you weren't really there, but that's not entirely true. Or I'm told I had a great time, you know. But what happens to your brain, the way I sort of address it, is so much input starts coming in that it's like a computer. The RAM gets loaded, and you get the blue screen of death. And that's probably me with the blue screen of death. It's like there's just too much coming in, and eventually there's a fog, and you can see it today with kids, especially younger performers, you know. And in addition now, with all the social media, with all the other input that's coming in, you can just see that glassed over look, which I equate to the blue screen of death. I cannot handle any more input. I can't handle any more information. Right. You know, just, hi, yeah, nice to meet you. Hi, it's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too. Here's another interesting parallel between you and them. Look at that. Monkees Monthly.
Yeah.
The same publisher as the Beatles Monthly did the Monkees.
I didn't even know that, yeah.
Really? You didn't know that?
I didn't know it was the same publisher. I mean, maybe I did, or somebody had told me, but...
Yeah.
Because I never saw a whole lot of this stuff until quite a while after the event.
Right.
Because one distinction between the Monkees and other groups,
Other well-known 4-week groups.
well, other well-known any group of the time, or even to this day, our main job was filming the television show. For a group like the Beatles or anybody else, their main job was recording. And you know, usually sleep all day and record all night or something. Well, we worked all day. We had from 7 o'clock in the morning until 6 or 7 at night, sometimes 12-hour days, just filming the television show. And then after that, I, as being, you know, de facto lead singer, I remember going in the recording studio and doing 2 or 3 lead vocals a night, because they needed so much material for the television show. And I would then go home and try to catch 6 hours sleep, get up the next morning, and I'm back on the set. And then, shortly thereafter, we started rehearsing for live performance. And I was taking lessons on the drums, and I would have had a kit, in the back room on the stage, and I was practicing and practicing. And there's not a whole lot of time to assimilate anything else. And we knew that we had a hit record. But funnily enough, Tommy Boyce of Boyce and Hart, who wrote, some of the biggest Monkey hits, he once said to me in the early days, he says, you have 2 or 3 top 10 records on Cashbox, which was a big magazine at the time. He reminded me years later that I said, what's Cashbox? Because I was a TV entertainer, and I really wasn't that familiar with the music business. But there wasn't a whole lot of time, again, without social media, without anything going on. The first time that I remember sort of recognizing, assimilating what had happened, how big it had become, it was December of '66. Excuse me. And we had been ensconced, incommunicado, in the television stage and in the recording studio for 4 or 5 months since the summer. We started filming, I don't know the exact date, but it would have been the spring or summer of '66, backing up, something to put together the television shows. And it went on the air in September, the first episode, and the record went to #1. And I remember being told, you got a #1 record. Oh, it's wonderful. I got to go. I got makeup in 20 minutes. And then, and the show's doing really well, getting great ratings. There's like a lot of excitement, But there was no evidence of it in my life. No one could find me in LA. In LA, or as a celebrity, you're always a bit of furniture anyway. And it was Christmas of that year. And we had a hiatus of like a week or 2. And I was going to go up and see my family who lived up in San Jose. And I was going to bring all my Christmas presents and drive up. And so I get in my car with my little Christmas list, and I drive down to my local mall where I've been shopping at for 30, since I was a child, 10, 12 years more. And I pull up in the parking lot, and I get out of my car, my list, and I go through the big glass doors, and I hear people screaming and running at me. And I thought it was a fire. And I'm holding open the door, going, don't panic, don't run, this way, slow down. Holding open the door. And all of a sudden I realized they're running at me. And I'm like, oh shit, and I had to go get back to my car, and I was pissed off. I couldn't go shopping. I had to send my roadie to do my Christmas shopping, but that was the first that I ever had an inkling until we went on the road and opened in Hawaii at a big arena in Honolulu. And then obviously it became very apparent that it had just gone crazy.
You did 5 huge shows at Wembley, England, didn't you, in the end of June 1967. Do you have